For decades, it's been a hotbed of UFOs and orbs and other flying machines, crypto creatures, animal mutilations, poltergeist activity, native lore and legends, and just all-around spooky, inexplicable activity. We're joined by a friend of mine, now known far and wide as the owner of Skinwalker Ranch, Brandon Fugel.
You could call Skinwalker Ranch, I think, the most strange real estate play of all time. And it was just 2 years ago that I went public with the fact that I had acquired the ranch from elusive aerospace billionaire Robert Bigelow and had no intention of ever revealing that I was the owner of the ranch. Was ultimately persuaded to come forward and go public. And here we are. I mean, the things that are going to be talked about tonight on your show, I believe are of historic importance, and I think people will reflect back on these times decades from now as really a tipping point in world history and really, the topics that are now making headline news and being recognized as legitimate. Yeah, I was quite nervous, to be honest, especially as someone who had never seen a UFO, a ghost, an orb, or anything of the sort. I acquired the property as a healthy skeptic, and buying the most scientifically studied paranormal hotspot on the planet, it was the source of so much controversy. Yeah, everything from cattle mutilations to UFO phenomena. It was a bit of a departure from my day-to-day responsibilities, and it was with heavy heart that I, kind of proceeded, but I felt like if there was even a 5% chance that there was some truth or reality to the claims, this could very well shape up to be the greatest science project of our time. And
how long did you have the property before it became clear something really was going on?
Right off the bat, within days of acquiring the property, I installed my own security, my own personnel. We really opened a new chapter and a new investigation to dive into it. I truly believe that there was most likely a 95% chance that there was a natural prosaic explanation for all that had been reported for years. And the first glimpses at the fact that there was something potentially unusual going on really came from one of my security who was actually running drone surveys of the property on a daily basis, who ended up capturing both video and still images in broad daylight of what could only be described as true unidentified flying objects, UFO craft. I was still not convinced that there was something extraordinary going on, even with him bringing those photos and all of the metadata straight to my office for analysis. I still remained somewhat skeptical until about 6 months into my ownership of the property. One day when we were hosting dignitaries with their security detail matched with mine, did we actually see what can only be described as really compelling phenomena over the property. And that day was a game changer. But, I tell people all the time, it took 6 months of owning the property before I myself personally had an experience that I could say was unusual. I mean, up until that time, I just found the property to be a very strikingly beautiful, landscape. I mean, you have this incredible mesa that runs the expanse of the property that has cave systems in it, and you have waterways, you have old, pioneer era homesteads that are still standing on the property that are haunting looking and add quite a bit to the backdrop. It's right out of a John Wayne movie or Westworld, because you have such a diverse landscape that is just stunning. So I was very surprised when, half a year into it, a lot of crazy things happened, and I had my own experience that I can't deny to this day with multiple witnesses. It's one thing to have an experience to visually see something that defies explanation, but to have witnesses standing with you that had professed earlier in the day that they were skeptical as well and had their entire world views turned upside down. I mean, that really ushers in quite a paradigm shift, if you will.
It's continued for you and your team pretty much the whole time, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's unpredictable. I mean, the phenomena, it's transient. The electromagnetic phenomena, for example, is completely unpredictable, but it does happen with regularity. And, just when you think that the ranch has gone quiet, someone visits and has a profound experience. It was funny, we had an investigative crew in this past year that came in after filming had concluded for the History Channel series for season 1. And this crew was with KSL Television out of Salt Lake City. And, they asked me before coming out, should we expect to see anything today? And I told them, I said, don't expect to see anything unusual. I look forward to allowing you to film the property, and ask any questions, meet with the team. Well, they came out, and I prepared them to not see anything. I told them, don't expect anything unusual to happen, and just gave them my own experience that I had gone 6 months as the owner without seeing anything with my own eyes that was unusual. And so I prepared them for what would be hopefully a memorable day, looking at a scenic backdrop and landscape with a very mysterious history. And they were shocked to find all sorts of things happen the day that they visited. I mean, not only did their drone fall out of the sky right there on camera, and ended up showing a warning message that popped up that the drone operator had never seen in years of handling, drones for, television investigations and whatnot. She'd never seen this message come up, and the message was that it stated that extreme electromagnetic interference detected, and it was just in red, just blinking, and it just baffled them. And then, corresponding with that, a lot of our other sensors, our tri-field meters, that we had elevated RF, radio frequency that just encompassed the ranch for a period of minutes, and upon pulling up the footage, some of our camera surveillance footage of the sky, we were surprised to see a dark object pass from one cloud up into another at the exact same moment that the drone was rendered inoperable. And in pulling up the footage, for the time both preceding and following the object going in and out of these clouds, there was no record of where it came from or where it went. And it just left everyone baffled. And then that evening, they set up, in the dark, cameras at the old homestead, the infamous Homestead 2, and captured what they believe was a flame or something that looked like a flame coming out of the floorboards of this old pioneer structure. And it was just inexplicable. Very interesting experiences that were compelling. And I think the most compelling part of these experiences that occurred on camera was the correlation. It wasn't just a UFO sighting. It was a UFO sighting simultaneous with, drone malfunction and other electromagnetic anomalies that occurred. And that data, those accounts that we continue to document and to catalog are what I think set our investigation apart from everything else that has come before.
One of the last times I was at the property outside, we had a drone, and it was flying outside the boundaries of your property. It flew just a little ways away from where we were, and then came back and went dive bombed right at my head, and it hit me in the face, and it's recorded. When you tell people, oh yeah, we saw something great, but we didn't get a shot of it because the batteries died, or the equipment died, the camera died, or some kind of electronic interference, they'll go, come on, I don't believe that. But it happens again and again and again, and I'm sure it probably happened to the production crew.
Constantly, throughout season 1 and season 2. And, the interesting thing was, we brought on numerous third-party experts. I mean, we brought on engineering companies, people that were engaged with the rocketry experiments. We had an instrumented, rocket. We also had instrumented balloons. We had ground penetrating radar studies and resistivity studies that were conducted on the property. And I've got to tell you, George, every single one that came out left scratching their heads because of just strange, everything from equipment malfunctions that occurred that, these people would go on camera stating that they'd never seen before, to, these third-party witnesses observing strange phenomena, whether it be in the sky above the ranch or picking up on their sensors below the ranch, that defied any conventional explanation. It just all adds up to really quite a science project.
it's hard to figure out what the cause of it is. But the nature of the evidence that you've collected is it really does have physical effects, but it's hard to figure out what's behind it.
Yeah, and so much of it is observational science. My principal investigator and really the chief scientist at Skinwalker Ranch that I've trusted with other projects for over a decade is physicist Eric Bard. And Eric constantly states that we're not here to believe or disbelieve, we're here to observe. And he also says that correlation does not mean causation, and always, I think, turns a skeptical eye toward any event or claim regarding the ranch that occurs. And, I think with scientific rigor and a focus on collecting the data, we're really determined to bring forward, I think, the best evidence that, something truly extraordinary is happening. I get asked all the time, is this activity, this UFO activity, another high strangeness, is it attributed to extraterrestrials, visitors from other worlds? Is it interdimensional in nature, or is it spiritual, angels and demons? And the honest answer, based on the data, is all of the above.
This is some kind of military experiment. They're shooting beam weapons at all you guys and messing with your head.
I wish in some ways that would be a lot more comforting, because that's at least something we can wrap our minds around. But to be honest, when we brought Dr. Taylor on site, Dr. Taylor, who works on various government programs, holds high security clearances. I mean, he's working right now actively with NASA and other agencies. He was very vocal with the fact that, a lot of what we thought that we were seeing or had reported in the past could very well, have some very conventional explanation, be part of some, skunk work, some covert aerospace program. And, Dr. Taylor's gone on record stating numerous times that he doesn't believe that you can ascribe, the origin or the agenda associated with the phenomena out at Skinwalker Ranch to some government program or black budget project or covert aerospace program.
You must get pestered 50 times a day. Hey, can I go to the ranch? But it's not a good idea to let a lot of people on there. And it's not, because there is a legitimate interactive quality and that it is unpredictable what will happen.
The sobering part of my stewardship is the fact that there is danger involved and that people have been hurt under my watch. We've had a number of people that have ended up in the hospital with injuries that baffle, medical professionals. People are always asking me, where's your data? Where's your data? You talk about acute medical episodes, occurring relative to the property, but where's your data? And the reality is we have hundreds of pages of medical reports and studies associated with a number of unfortunate incidents where people have ended up, with some very disturbing injuries and illnesses associated with their time on the property. And it's not for the faint of heart. We require everyone who enters the property, we require them to sign a liability waiver, acknowledging the risks associated with the ranch. And it's really sobering. It's something that we're really trying to wrap our minds around and take, I think, further precautions with. I mean, health and safety is something that we've had to really focus even more on this past year in light of the incidents that have occurred.
Thomas Winterton, good guy. He had a really strange injury, sent him to the hospital. You didn't know if he was going to make it. How's he doing?
He's doing well. He's nearly recovered. Dr. Taylor also, ended up, going to the hospital with injuries. And,
radiation. He was exposed to radiation, right?
Correct. And when, you saw on camera, when they went back to test the area, they couldn't find any evidence of radiation or any trace of what could have caused those injuries to occur, but they were very real. And, in the case of Thomas Winterton, life-threatening. I mean, it was touch and go there for a few days when he was in the hospital. Yeah, and there are others that we really can't get into, but that are just as real.
There's a story you told me, maybe it's too personal. I would understand if you can't answer it, but you shared it with me about a really big guy who was there, big, tough guy, who basically was frozen.
Completely immobilized. You bet. Well, you remember me mentioning 6 months into my ownership, we had a really incredible day where a lot of things happened at once. On that particular day, the armed security for the visiting dignitary. It was this huge, 6'6", huge hulk of a man who was accompanying us for the tour of the ranch with this individual. Ended up not only being completely immobilized, but ended up in the hospital for weeks immediately following his visit with illness that just baffled the doctors. And it was interesting when we were out exploring the homesteads. We were out in these UTVs, and we pulled up in the Polaris Ranger. It was this open air UTV. We all got out, went around the front, and within minutes, a lot of strange things happened. Eric Bard, my principal investigator, his smartphone started going crazy. He captured it there and was able to actually screen capture what was happening. And then everyone was feeling kind of a sense of vertigo that was there. And then we realized that this security professional was absent, that he had not followed us around the front and wasn't there. So I went to go seek him out and see where he was. And as I walked around the back of the old homestead, it was like I was entering an anechoic chamber, a soundproof room. And, George, you know what it's like when you enter a soundproof chamber. It's really a strange sensation. All the ambient noise comes to a halt. It feels like that sensation when you cup your hands to your ears. And then I see this individual standing fully upright in the back of this open-air UTV with his eyes shut and not responding to me shouting his name. Well, as the ambient noise came back and, the strange sensation subsided and I came up to the vehicle saying his name, his eyes fluttered open and, he started moving and he said, "Wow, what happened?" And he began to explain that when everyone was jumping out of the UTV, he was completely frozen, couldn't move. And then everything went black. And he says, "How long have I been standing here?" And I said, "Well, about 10 minutes. And I asked him if he'd ever had that sort of experience before in his life. And he said, "Absolutely not." And was really visibly shaken. It was quite a strange experience. The missing time, if you will, the fact that he was immobilized, and you talk about a documented account of an acute medical episode that led to hospitalization the next day with someone who was in perfect health with the strength of an ox. It's undeniable.
The property it sizes you up, and some of the most dangerous sort of effects seem to have happened to the biggest, baddest, toughest people there, to bodyguards, security personnel, people like that. It happened to Robbie Williams. You were gracious enough to host a group of us with this international pop star Robbie Williams, whose security guy saw something really, really strange. I don't know. It seems like people who go there packing weapons, military people, intelligence people who are tough hombres, and male and female, they're the ones that get the brunt of it.
Yeah, it can bring people to their knees, both figuratively and literally. I'm often asked if I'm a believer now. And I think I share the same opinion and share the same position that members of my team now inhabit, and that is I'm not a believer, I'm an experiencer.
People figure, well, this is a TV show, it must be scripted. And the events we see, maybe that's special effects created for the show.
Oh, couldn't be more wrong. We've never had a script. We've never had anything pushed in front of us. In fact, that was a key condition of entering into the agreement with the History Channel. It had to be 100% fact, real, not contrived, fabricated, or manipulated in any way. And I think it's important to note that none of us had ever been on television and had never really anticipated ever anything like this in our lives. So this is a very unexpected and new experience for us.
You also hear from your critics, Brandon, there's no evidence. This doesn't really count as evidence. It's just random events. Eric Bard, can you address the idea of evidence? Is it fair to say you have evidence, but you're not sure evidence of what?
Well, I think you've said it well, George. Yes, we have a lot of events that are unusual, outlier events. These are not everyday occurrences. A lot of things that defy prosaic treatment. We are continuing, for lack of a better term, we're continuing to vet the inherited narrative. There's a lot of work that precedes ours. And so, as we put the pieces together, they self-assemble, and we can see that we are collecting data of the kind that really, in many ways, does match the description that we find throughout that narrative. We're talking about luminous phenomena and, of course, anomalies that you've already named with electronic devices. And then there are subjective or visceral experiences of those who are here, either the residents or the visitors, occupants of the ranch, experience all sorts of sensory, unusual assault. I don't know if I'm understating it or overstating it, but when you have groups of people who experience bouts of vertigo, hearing unusual sounds whose origins cannot be identified, hair standing on end, the sense that you're being targeted for predation by something you can't see. I think all of this is ongoing, and of course it's interesting to us.
Well, and George, this is Brandon, important to note that what we've brought to bear on our docuseries is compelling evidence. I mean, we're showing video, photographic evidence coupled with eyewitness accounts, most of which are accompanied by third-party expert voices that have been involved with our investigation, and this all correlates to a degree with acute medical episodes, electromagnetic anomalies, all carefully documented and presented. I mean, you add all of that up and you present it, it's very difficult for me to understand how someone can be so dismissive or skeptical when we're presenting what I believe to be the most compelling evidence ever presented in history relative to the reality of these topics.
A lot of the things that happen, you could look at them individually and say, well, that's kind of mundane. The compass is acting weird, or the batteries die, or the camera goes out. It's when you look at the totality of this stuff that it gets pretty strange. Brandon, you put in cameras, a lot of cameras, before the TV show was even a thought in your head. And you guys have been able to document the plethora of weird little tiny things that happen. The unique combination of events that'll happen where you set off a rocket and then orbs appear, and then the rocket guys get some weird magnetic effects. You have a lot of those kinds of things that you're able to document now because you got the cameras there.
Well, and we have some of the most advanced scientific instrumentation that has been brought to bear to better document and understand these issues. I mean, we showed how we're utilizing very expensive FLIR camera systems and SLAM scanners in order to better document and monitor the spaces here on the ranch that have a history associated with them, and being able to draw from all of these scientific platforms that were put in place well before any television effort was discussed. And this is a unique opportunity, I believe, for the general public to be actively participating in an ongoing scientific investigation.
Eric, there are measurable phenomena there. There's no question. Electromagnetic anomalies, gravitational. I mean, you've got, effects, radiation, gamma rays, things that you can measure, but they're fleeting. They're there 1 minute and then they're gone, as if they just poof, vanish, which shouldn't be the way it is, but it is how it is, right?
Yep. We tire of using the same terminology over and over, but it applies, and that is we're dealing with transient phenomena. They're transient, which means they are short-lived, just as you said. They also appear to be localized, happening in one location on the ranch, not another, and sometimes so localized that if we have a group of people gathered together or a group of instruments, one person or one instrument will register something and another will not. It's difficult to get one's mind around it, and it's very trying of my patients, and I think sometimes of the patients of our entire team.
Well, try to put yourself in the shoes of Thomas Winterton, who is tasked with overseeing a lot of the physical facilities and the infrastructure, and I don't think there's a more frustrated person some days than Tom Winterton. Would you say so, Tom?
Well, I think I've lost track of the number of times that Eric has notified me that we're having problems with a specific camera or instrument. I go out there to start troubleshooting it, only to have it bring itself back online and start working correctly, or that one will work fine and it moves to another area. I've lost count of the number of times that we have tried to troubleshoot something and leave more mystified than when I got there.
Caleb, could you share with us what was going on with your phone at the end of season 2?
Yeah, I've been on the ranch now for about 5.5 years, and that phone, I've had it for probably most of it, and I actually got a new one, and that new one actually exhibited some of that same phenomenon going on with it within 3 months of being on the ranch. And a lot of people like to say that the screen was damaged and things like that. And yeah, it was damaged. I'm fighting with people in my other job. I got a lot of things going on, and I'm not going to sit there and fix my phone every time I got a crack in it. But it's kind of one of those things that whenever we're having these bigger experiments going on, we're always looking for any little thing that's going on that's out of the ordinary. And a lot of it was my phone was exhibiting these things around those, specifically when we're launching rockets or when we're out doing some excavation and things like that. And then one of the biggest things for me was, I don't know if this information is out there with my phone, is it only happened on the ranch for about the first 2 or 3 years. It never occurred off the ranch or anywhere else. It was only here on the ranch.
And it basically something cracked the code. I mean, breaking into somebody's iPhone is hard, but something broke into yours that was displaying other languages. Am I exaggerating that?
It was actually it was cycling through all the different language settings on my phone and exhibiting different sequences of words and things like that, specifically around like 911 and emergency, and almost like that's where we don't know if it was a warning or someone's calling for help.
I think the first time I was on Skinwalker Ranch, before it was called Skinwalker Ranch, 2001 or so, there was a guy there I met named Joseph Jr. Hicks, and he was the unofficial historian of UFO cases, incidents for the Uinta Basin. He'd been a science teacher, had investigated hundreds of cases, kept meticulous files, and we're standing there looking at this red sandstone ridge above the property, and he says, "Oh, yeah, that's in the path of the Skinwalker." And I go, "What?" And he told me about the legend, and I knew right then that was a term that was stuck in my head, that it would be part of a title. Had no idea that it would be known worldwide by you guys and you're part of your TV show. But Joseph Jr. Hicks was able to establish a timeline for events that have happened on the ranch, around the ranch, throughout the basin. And Brandon, you've been able to put together a timeline that extends way, way back.
Yep, 1930s, nearly 100 years of credible accounts and documented incidents. I mean, we featured live testimony by former law enforcement that actually interacted with the former owners preceding the Shermans back in the mid-'80s that really came here and responded to all sorts of disturbing activity that was plaguing the residents at that time. So this is something that goes way back. Joseph Jr. Hicks, who is a very well-respected teacher, scientist, really a documentarian, had kept meticulous records, as you know, going back to 1952, documenting the reality of the phenomena in the Uinta Basin and this very unique area. And physically, we have countless hours of interviews that we conducted with him during our stewardship the last 6 years before his passing that we'll be able to release and share with others on our web portal.
A story comes to mind, if I can share it. The timing of things is so often so suggestive as to be troubling. We'll be having a conversation about something, and I'll share one example of this. I was participating in an interview for one of the local news agencies, and the two individuals who came out from the news agency were, of course, interested in the physical effects themselves. What might be the physics behind the phenomenology, and I started to relate the physics and what evidence we have to support the conjecture that there may be some very strong transient magnetic fingerprint, for example. And as we were having that discussion, no sooner had I said those words, but we saw some of the cameras begin to malfunction. We saw the battery depletion, which is a very common occurrence, and then a second camera, a replacement camera, refused to connect. I continued my narrative about magnetic transients and what some of the medical or specifically the neurological effects might be. Very interesting conversation. We wrapped up. The crew went outside, and the woman Megan, who was the camera and drone operator, got her drone aloft for a brief time, but then had to bring it back down because she received a message on the controller. That message was to the effect, excessive magnetic interference detected. Please relocate to a better environment. So, this is so closely tied to the discussion that we had just moments before. It's very suggestive. It's almost as if we're being surveilled, or as if something is happening in response to the things we are discussing or the plans that we're making, if not to the very thoughts that we're having.
Thomas Winterton, you believe that the ranch sort of sizes you up, and sometimes it really seizes on people, picks them out, and gives them a really bad time.
Well, it's a great question, and it's one that coming onto the ranch for the first time I thought was absolutely ludicrous and crazy, but spending time here and observing and witnessing the things that are happening, you come to the conclusion that there couldn't be any other explanation for it. And it's hard, like, Eric alluded to earlier, when you have a group of individuals standing around and some are feeling effects while others standing right next to them are not, when we have instruments that are displaying numbers and messages that are specific to the person that's carrying them, as all these things add up, it's hard to not feel like you're being targeted. And it does seem like, for some reason, it affects others more, it affects some more than others. And it may just be my observation, but I do feel like the type of attitude that you come onto the ranch with may have an effect on the kind of experience you have. I came on with a very cavalier attitude, very skeptical attitude, and I have to say I've been humbled. And as I watch others, those that seem to come on with reverence and with respect seem to have a little bit better go of it than those that came on like me.
You were not only humbled, you were endangered. Your life was in danger because of what happened on the property or associated with the property, right?
During my tenure here on the ranch, I did have an unexplained head injury that landed me in the hospital, hospitalized me for a week. About midway through that stay, my doctor advised my wife that there was a good chance that I may not pull out of it, and if I did, that I would have permanent brain damage. And so there's definitely been some scary medical effects to myself as well as other members of the team.
Caleb, it seems to me that some of the most dramatic things that have happened to people and the longest lasting effects have occurred to people who are packing weapons. You wear a weapon out there often. Has it singled you out?
I've actually had a injury myself, but I've never felt like I've been targeted. And the intention why I'm carrying weapons is purely for defense and for protection, not only for myself but those around me. Overall, had a very positive experience on the ranch. I've experienced a lot of really interesting and unexplainable things that I've seen, and it's just something that I will always carry a weapon, just from my experiences on and off the ranch, particularly in law enforcement. I don't feel comfortable with not having something, and it's kind of that safety blanket, if you will.
As you all know, it's now called the hitchhiker effect, that some of the personnel who went there, government personnel, tough hombres, intelligence officers, combat veterans who went there, who were really frightened out of their wits by what they encountered, and then it followed them. Under the OSAP program, it's been going on in their homes for 10 years. Brandon, let me ask you, any hitchhiker type effects for you or any other members of of your team that you can talk about? And have you reached a conclusion about whether this thing is evil or whether it doesn't really care about its effects on people at all?
I think we're definitely dealing with forces or entities that are malevolent. That's evidenced by the targeting that has taken place, by the acute medical episodes and other incidents. We have, unfortunately, a number of cases with our own team of the hitchhiker effect being very real in their worlds, where certain phenomena, in many cases disturbing, troubling phenomena, has followed them home, has been witnessed by their families, and has left them, I think, to a degree with elevated concern. It's one thing to experience things on the ranch, but to have something follow you home and impact dependents, it's quite another.
Eric Bard, you spend way too much time on the property. You spend it by yourself. I know your friends and colleagues there worry about you out there. What about you? If anyone's going to have something follow them home, I think it would be you.
George, it's not an easy topic to address, particularly when it's ongoing.
Yeah.
I'm just as interested in comparing notes with you as I am in sharing anything that's happened in my own home or in the space between the ranch and my home.
This phenomena, this intelligence at the ranch, it doesn't seem to mind being seen at times. But it's in control. It decides what you get to see, what you don't. Is this solvable?
Well, we're definitely assembling more pieces to the puzzle than has ever been before brought to bear in order to understand and validate the reality of what we're doing and experiencing. It's interesting. Our predecessors, scientists, military operatives who served on the ranch, described the phenomena as a precognitive, non-human, sentient intelligence. There is an element that seems to be 1-2 steps ahead of us at times and does allow itself to be recorded at times and at others, and I think most of the time appears to be using some type of cloaking technology in order to evade being closely documented.
Eric, same question. A lot of the experiments that you design, firing up rockets, you're really trying to provoke a reaction.
Yeah, to imagine that we are in control, as if there are buttons and levers at our disposal, would be to deceive yourself. Obviously, as I think you know, we are sometimes reduced to the role of observers, and perhaps that's where we do best. I don't mind admitting that sometimes I have even faced criticism that my approach has been very light-handed. Insofar as I like to see things in their nascent state, I like to observe the ranch in its natural state, see what happens without any provocation. But as you said, experiments of the kind that you just named, the rockets, the digging, and so forth, such as we see in the televised series, are the diametric opposite approach. Let's see if, in fact, we do elicit a response. I think both approaches have merit, but I think we're learning just as much from observing the ranch and treating the ranch, if you will, as a crime scene, and doing as little as possible to alter it, not making any irreversible changes, being as non-invasive as possible under some circumstances, and then, when led by the data, doing things that actually do change the environment, such as digging.
There was an incident at the end of season 2 where you guys had this helicopter flying over the triangle, and all the instruments were telling the crew that there was something underneath that was flying along with the helicopter. Was that, in your view, a dangerous situation? Was the intelligence, whatever it is, playing mind games and just trying to scare you?
Well, when that was taking place, Dragon and I were on the ground here at the command center, and we were tasked with watching the flight radar and helping direct Cameron and Travis and Eric up in the helicopter to make sure that they hit the points that we were interested in. And really, when it comes to those type of things, I really take my cues from, of course, Cameron, who is a very experienced pilot and has safety as his first priority. And then I look to Eric and to Travis to see what their reaction is, whether this is something that can be easily explained away. And I have to say that, what you didn't see on TV very much was that as this was persisting, Cameron started to take some pretty evasive maneuvers to see if they could evade this. And this was not just once and done. Cameron tried several times to evade it, and Bryant and I on the ground, we couldn't see anything. Not with the naked eye, not through the binoculars. There was nothing showing up on our radar on screen, and so we started to get concerned as they were radioing down to us and telling us that there was something below the helicopter. It wasn't until they landed, and when they unloaded from the helicopter, I could see the sheer. They were worried, and that's kind of when it set into Dragon and I that it was pretty serious. But yeah, it does rattle us. And when you see Cameron, and then you see Eric and Travis, and all of them are extremely concerned at what they just witnessed, it causes concern for all of us.
Do you think it's solvable?
I think that we have the opportunity to learn more about it, but it seems like it's always one or two steps ahead of us. So, sometimes I feel like it will allow us to know what it wants us to know, and that's the extent of it. Sometimes people are asking if we do special effects on the show, and I was chuckling to myself because we don't fabricate those. Any special effects they see on the show are compliments of the ranch.
Caleb, you're a lawman. You're used to investigating cases, cracking cases. I think that adds a lot of credibility. But this is the kind of case that would drive a lawman crazy. Do you think it's solvable?
I agree. The biggest thing is a lot of what we're dealing with is what we'd call circumstantial evidence. It's points in a direction, but it's not that tangible thing that you can pick up, put in a bag, and walk away and say, we know what this is, and put it together like a puzzle. And that's part of it. That's kind of the journey. Is we're trying to figure this out, and we got all these different narratives that we got to sort through. Just like in a case, you got all your witnesses, and they're all saying what they saw, and everyone perceives things so differently, and it's hard trying to sift through all that. I think we have a huge opportunity to really learn about some of this phenomenology going on, but ultimately, I don't know if we could really say what's going on.
Dr. Chris Lee, you're a scientist, a man of science. Scientists don't like to admit that there's something that might be outside the scope of science, that science might be flummoxed by this.
What I see here is this is a multidisciplinary study looking at this ranch and the experiences currently and historic on this ranch, again, with a multidisciplinary team. And as you put each of those puzzle pieces together, more puzzle pieces that you have to add together into that, to put together a more broad and a picture will allow more to be known in the future. And so, again, I'm a scientific person. I like to view things from a scientific nature, and I suspect that with time and more experiments that more answers will be known, and that things will be moved forward as far as knowledge goes.
This is an active, ongoing scientific investigation. This is happening 24/7, 365 days a year, regardless of whether there are television cameras here or production. We're just fortunate to have a very, very good world-class team of producers that are helping us properly document and capture so much of the activity that we're experiencing. And those things, and some of it's negative, some of it is very troubling. I think people are going to be left scratching their heads at some of the things that happen because a lot of it's not positive. But we're also, I think, yielding some insights and presenting evidence that has never been presented before.
Can this be resolved with technology, or is it going to have to be solved on a person-to-person basis?
For me, it really is an open question. Can we get to the kind of closure that a lot of people naturally crave through the use of instruments alone? or might we have to resort to means that go outside of just instrumented science? I'm much more comfortable talking about instrumented measurements, particularly those that we put in place and allow it to data log. And I'm very comfortable with an approach that allows the data to self-assemble into a coherent story. My hope is that with sufficient time and sufficient distribution of instruments across the property, of sufficient sensitivity, we'll get the kinds of clues that not just our team, but anyone consummate about this subject will find satisfying. But I often say, look, let's not crave closure more than we crave the truth. There is a test of patience afoot here.
Thomas Winterton, the last time you were here on this program, we talked about your physical injuries as a result of being associated with the ranch, and they're real and they're serious. This is too dangerous. It's dangerous for you and maybe your family.
If I thought that leaving the ranch would mean the ranch would leave me, I would seriously consider it. The data shows, though, and the experience of the individuals that have been on the ranch and worked here that leave and disassociate completely and continue to have this leaves me with little faith that me leaving the ranch would do anything to alleviate my concerns at home and to those that I care about. And so I am of the opinion that if leaving the ranch is not going to fix the problem, then I want to be in the middle of trying to find what is. Right now, it's frustrating to have something happen at home, but at least I'm surrounded with such a great team where I can come back and share what's going on, and we can look at it objectively and try to figure it out. I can't imagine having these things continue to happen to me and not have that access or the ability to sit down with these guys and share. So, quite honestly, I'm in the middle of it, and I don't. I half joke that it's like joining the mafia. There's only one way out.
Caleb, you're a big, tough guy. You're a lawman, a military experience. You have weapons at your disposal. You're close to Travis Taylor. He was the arch skeptic, I think, of Brandon's team coming into this thing, and now he's very much changed. Can you address sort of the general feeling that you and he and the team members have about the risks involved and whether or not the risks are too great for what you're probably able to accomplish?
It's a conversation that we have all the time, and there have been days where we've all kind of felt like we just want to leave and never come back. But with the risks, it's kind of I think most of us take the stance of we're kind of explorers and we're going out and nothing would ever get done if you didn't take any risk. And for me, I guess it's kind of the challenge, and I'm not going to back down from it. And at the end of the day, it is Brandon's ranch, and if he feels that it's too dangerous for us out here, that I think that's his call. But we all kind of accept those risks. I've been in multiple jobs now that I'm one shift away from not going home, and I accept that fact.
I'm looking up at the records on our VMS, the video management system. This is a machine vision system that's taking in all those camera feeds. And I see 26,898 video clips queued up, be reviewed by the guy talking to you right now. It is a daunting task. And out of those approximately 27,000 video clips, we'll be fortunate to have even one that has any real evidentiary value or any relevance to the narrative. So maybe that helps calibrate expectations or help people get a feel for what this work is like.
I should also point out that you go through this video. So you'll have an episode, there's an event, you see something strange right after the event happens, but then you later go back through the video and sometimes we'll see things that the team did not see at the time of the incident, but there it is on video, right?
Absolutely. That's the wonderful thing about doing this work in the time frame that we're doing it now versus during the earlier era with NIDS and BAS. We benefit from the fact that the technology has evolved. Whereas instead of taking effectively time lapse video data, we're getting your standard 30 frames per second or so of both video and audio at a much better definition. And so, of course, we see features emerging whenever we come back and examine it just, on the screen, or perhaps after doing some post-processing, some image processing. I get a chance to do some of that with the computer to bring out details.
We know for a fact that the government is monitoring and tracking our investigation. We were summoned to Washington, D.C. to give testimony relative to the reality and to present documentary evidence associated with our investigation.
DIA program was canceled because there was some fear that it was a demonic entity and they didn't want to mess with it.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely seeing that there is a trickster aspect to the phenomenon. Very strange things that happen. Our equipment is constantly meddled with. What we're dealing with, it seems to be 1-2 steps ahead of us, which is really unnerving. But at least I think we're developing, some of the best evidence ever in human history that we are not alone.
Erica Luke's passion for UFOs dates back to her childhood. She has investigated Skinwalker Ranch and the surrounding areas for years. Can you give me sort of a broad overview, broad strokes about the kinds of paranormal or unknown phenomena that you have identified or investigated in connection with the Uinta Basin?
So in the Uinta Basin, we've got it's a menagerie of all sorts of things. So you've got typically the balls of light that are seen above ground, above the ridge tops. You see structured craft, creatures, disincarnate voices. You hear reports of machinery underground. So there is a paranormal activity. So you've got people that are in homes that are having things that are mysteriously misplaced, and then in another location they're experiencing strange occurrences with their electronics and things. So it truly is you've got everything in one place, and it's not just specific to Skinwalker Ranch. This has truly been taking place throughout the Uinta Basin for 50 plus years.
And what do you think it is? Is there something about that location? I mean, I'm sure you have some theories.
And I think what I'm trying to do, and many others are trying to do, we're trying to find commonalities. So what makes this location similar to the Brown Mountain location or places like Min Min or Hesdalen, Norway? I mean, there are places that you see all over the world, or Yakima is another great example, and you mentioned that in Hunt for the Skinwalker, where you see all types of phenomena in one place. So when you're looking at that, you have to ask yourself, you have to look at, what do we have here? Do we have specific mineral or rare earth content? Are there gravitational anomalies? Is there a Native American reservation? Is there a military installation? And it's very interesting when you start kind of putting the pieces together and making the connections. And that's when I was working with MUFON, I started a project called Project Orange, and we were specifically going through data and finding sightings clusters and then identifying the commonalities. And so it's curious, but I truly believe we can find things, and I think the Uinta Basin is a great example for this, because there are so many, we've got a lot of energy resources up there. We've got a lot of mines. We've got a lot of the Native American reservations. We've got some military. It's everything. And so when you just break that down, we've just got to kind of peel back the layers and see why this location is unique and why are there other locations all over the world that are hosting the same types of phenomena.
It's hard to find somebody in that basin who lives there who hasn't had an experience or a sighting, or somebody in their family has had a sighting. And I don't know if you've had the same experience on the ground there or not, but that's been mine.
It is absolutely. I mean, people there, that it is a common thing for them. And in fact, one of the witnesses that I work with, he's lived there his whole life, as has his family. I mean, it's one of those things, you're out there, you see it, and you don't necessarily talk about it. It's just you kind of turn the other way, and I think that's how a lot of the cattle ranchers are in that area, because nobody knows what to do with this. I mean, who do you talk to? Where do you go for help?
You mentioned this three-generation cattle rancher. Can you tell us a little bit more about what they've seen over the years?
So I have a couple different multi-generational people that I've been working with, families. One specific person that is a cattle rancher has lost a lot of livestock, and including when he was younger, a family pet due to the strange mutilations. And then you've got the anomalous light phenomena that is oftentimes seen, very similar to the Skinwalker area. In fact, his property is close to Skinwalker, and so it's the same types of things, and they're very reserved people. And again, this is so out of their box, and they don't know who to talk to about it, and they don't really want to bring attention to this. Specifically because if you've got cattle and you're losing livestock, what is the insurance company going to say? You're losing a lot of money.
The idea that there might be underground bases or the underground machinery, so you've heard that from multiple people.
Yes, and it's not just in this location. I mean, we've heard this back in Missouri, where you have a lot of, the Marley Woods. You've got a lot of different places back there that have repeated occurrences of the same types of phenomena. And so that is a very common thing. And now for me, it is my job to try to get different researchers together and to pool the data and to make the connections. But as you know, it's incredibly difficult because people don't want to come forward with that. They're reticent, but they don't feel comfortable. They don't know what will happen, and it's very vital that we create a cohesive community.
The ranchers who have experienced this, either seen the flying orbs or other kinds of craft or have had a mutilation, do they have theories about it? Do they share with you what they think it is?
They don't. It is so completely out of their paradigm. I don't think they know what to think about it. It's just like when you were dealing with the Shermans, they don't know how to deal with this, but they know it is nothing that can be explained, and it's frightening to people. And so it's such a hard thing. How do you help these people? How do you create a supportive community? I don't know. I mean, it's a tragic thing, and I truly hope that we can figure this out and create a support system.
Do you have any creature sightings?
We do have creature sightings. Yes, we do. In fact, that's always a complete trip up there. We have sightings of 8-foot-tall creatures with the glowing red eyes, typical kind of Skinwalker sightings reports. You get Bigfoot creatures that are seen in the area. So it's the same type of thing. We also have reports. I talked to Ryan Burns, who lives up near there, and you will get animals. You'll see animals that have test tubes hanging off of them as they're walking through properties. So you get all sorts of things, and then you get the wolf sightings. It truly is. It's mind-blowing.
Have you made any inroads with the tribe? It was a tough nut to crack for the NIDS guys, I know, trying to get the tribe to open up and talk about things that they have seen.
You know what? I keep working on that, and I've made a few inroads, and like you say, that's it's a tough thing to do, and I don't blame anybody for being reticent to talk about this, because there's so many people in this field that don't take it seriously and don't hold people's anonymity with regard to the witness accounts. We need to take this very seriously, and when you're dealing with people's beliefs and their heritage, it's a very different thing. But every day I'm making connections, and I'm acquiring case reports of Skinwalker sightings and I'm very fortunate to know that one of the foremost Native American historians in the world. And so I've been meeting with him and learning about all of the Native American lore. And it's been a truly amazing process for me.
Do you have a network of other researchers who are there on the ground who will call you up if something weird happens?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, and that has been a hard thing. I've established networks of people all over the world, but I will tell you in this area it has been incredibly difficult. But Dave Rosenfeld, Ryan Burns, they have been incredible. I have a family that I've been working with, and they will give me reports, and then we'll do some investigations. And I'm also reaching out to law enforcement and different witnesses, and it's just you just have to get people comfortable, and you have to assure people that you're not there to to exploit what's happening there. This is sensitive, and I also think you've brought up so many times the great points of these weekend warriors that come in there, and they truly don't understand what they're dealing with. And in a lot of cases, what takes place up there isn't good. And unless you have it together, you truly shouldn't be going up there and messing around with what's taking place.
Have you heard any stories about the phenomena following people, attaching itself?
That is always a common concern, and it does. I think that if you are a person that has a weak constitution, that isn't necessarily, and I hate to even go there, but you have to be a strong and a good person, because you don't know what you're dealing with. And when you come into contact with some of these negative energies, a lot of times they can and they will attach themselves to you. And I think that's very common in the paranormal realm, and it can cause a lot of problems in your life. So when I had sightings reports when I was MUFON State Director, and we knew that there was something pretty malevolent taking place, I was very hesitant to send in my team, because I wasn't sure if they would be truly prepared for what they would encounter. And that's something you have to look at when you're going into places like this.
And some people really get messed up by the experience.
And that's the thing. I mean, you hear different sides to the story, and some people will say that they feel almost comforted by what's there, like it's keeping a watch over them. But then you get reports from, we had a case that was submitted to us, and it was this person that was so terrified. I mean, he had stockpiled arms and had many guard dogs around him, and I don't know if, I mean, he was obviously terrorized, but I don't know if this is, you also have to look at the individual and what's going on in their lives at the time. Is there something negative that's taking place in their environment that's causing a negative energy or entity to come into their space? I mean, there's so many different ways to approach this, and you have to step back, and my main priority is to keep the people that I'm with safe. And I think we truly don't know what's taking place. And you saw that probably a lot on the ranch, and dealing with the experiences of Colm and others at the at Skinwalker. I did have the pleasure of speaking with Frank Salisbury on different occasions. He was the head of the Department of Plant Physiology for Utah State University, and he was also a leading scientist who worked with the Atomic Energy Commission, and he was also a devout Mormon. And for him to go into this and to research this, it really pushed his boundaries. But he did absolutely feel that there was an intelligence that perhaps could be from outer space, but it was in this isolated region of Utah, and he felt that there was a base for UFOs, and they were putting on a show, and that's where the name, the Utah UFO Display, came from. And his book is a tremendous resource.
Dr. Travis Taylor is here. People that think this is all, just a made-for-TV show, it's not really an investigation.
Yeah, so first of all, it's not a television show. It is a scientific investigation that's being documented for television. Those are two different approaches. A television show implies all the things of a television show, where you have scripts and you have things that are contrived or made up or whatever. That is not at all what's happening at Skinwalker Ranch and on the secret of Skinwalker Ranch. Everything you see is in the moment. It's real. It's what our sensors gather. And, in fact, we're still shaking our heads, scratching our heads, and going through data and trying to figure out what some of the things were that we saw 2 years ago, much less last year, much less this weekend. So That's the way science is. It's going to take a while for us to figure it all out, but what we can figure out and get in front of the public, I mean, that's what we're doing. Part of the scientific method is to report your results. Well, we're reporting our results as quickly and in openly manner as we possibly can, and that's through the secret of Skinwalker Ranch.
Would you give me your assessment of what, if any, progress you and the team have made in the years that you've been at the ranch?
Well, the first thing was to determine if the phenomena was real or not. I mean, we weren't really front-loaded with a lot of information from the Bigelow-era team. They still hold a lot of that close to their vest, other than the public things like the books and so on. And we've spoken to them, but we had to decide for ourselves if we thought the phenomena was real. Well, I would say 100% now. We absolutely know the phenomena is real. Might even be multiple phenomena, but we can't just determine that yet. And then the next step will be to determine what the phenomena is. It's really difficult because from yourself, from being exposed to the research from the past, that it doesn't just show up every day on Tuesday at 9 a.m. so we can go set up everything and be ready for it. I mean, it happens when it happens.
You know that the challenge, too, is it's not replicatable. I mean, a lot of the stuff that happens, it happens once and it doesn't happen again, which is a major challenge for science, right?
Yeah. It's a completely different type of research. I mean, you have to realize that any chance you get to collect data, you have to collect the data then. It doesn't matter what time of day, what type of circumstance, because you don't know when it's going to happen again or even if it's going to happen again. And most of the time, it doesn't happen again in the same way. That's why people have a hard time understanding, why don't we already have the answer? We've been there all this time. Why aren't you telling us everything? We're telling you everything that we can pretty much tell you, that we can figure out. Anything else that we would, say would probably just, guesses and speculation.
Am I correct in saying that you are, in essence, poking and prodding largely because you want to generate a response from whatever it is to see what happens?
Yeah, so Eric Bard is the full-time there, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. He is the principal investigator and was, 3 years before I got there. And he is mainly over all of the main decisions or whatever as far as the research program, but he's more of a much more of an observationalist. And so they brought me on because my expertise was in experimental physics and experimental concepts. And so Eric and I will sit down and brainstorm, and then I'll come up with ways to do experiments and things that we can test and things that we can move forward with. And then once we figure out the details of the experiment, then we go and we pitch the cost to both Brandon and the network and try to get cost sharing going there, and then try to find the resources to do it, put the resources in place, and then perform the experiments. And so there's a lot of logistics and effort involved in something like this. And because there was one experiment that I counted had 1,016 moving parts, and there was probably 100 people around helping us keep all those parts in the air and moving. A key thing we discovered in the last year, there's some sort of time-based anomaly that's occurring on the ranch very often, whether it's something is spoofing the clocks and all the equipment or time itself is actually being confused. We can't determine yet, but there is definitely some sort of time factor in what's going on there.
It feels strangely elusive, too, doesn't it? I mean, transitory radiation, for example. I mean, you can testify personally the radiation was real because it affected you.
Yes, I had all the symptoms, classic symptoms of gamma ray radiation exposure. I saw 4 different physicians. 2 of them were experts in radiation exposures, and talked to an oncologist as well afterwards. And it was real symptoms of gamma ray exposure. My gamma ray detector detected gamma ray radiation, and it also knocked out many electronic components near me when it happened. And we have since put gamma ray detectors in random locations on the ranch, and some of them have had huge spikes, even more than one that I got hit with. And then, major spikes. We don't know where they're coming from. And some of them, read normal things. So it's a random situation, and how do you prepare for something like that? You can.
I mean, normally, if you've got something radioactive, its radiation is detectable. It should still be there, but this radiation is there 1 minute, and then it's gone.
Jack Sarfati, he's a fairly well-known theoretical physicist. He has told me believes that it was a UFO, like a Tic Tac or some sort of warp drive concept. As it's moving in one direction, it accelerates the light that passes by it in the other direction to up towards the gamma rays. And he believes that, I may have been by one that may have passed by. That's a speculation. And there are other possibilities. If there was some kind of traversable wormhole, you might have a similar effect near the mouth of it that would accelerate standard radio waves up to gamma rays or something, and it could have caused it. But that seems like it would have been a much bigger effect instead of just like a small, tight beam that affected me and didn't affect guys that were 10 feet away from me.
Does it feel like there is an intelligence behind it?
Sometimes it does. It seems like it's predicting what we're about to do, and it'll shift so that what we do is ineffective. Where one day we find a telltale sign, and we go with a better piece of equipment back to that same telltale sign, and now it's moved or it's changed the way it's functioning, and so we don't measure it the right way with this new piece of equipment we bring out. Or we're wanting to dig or do some demolition or move something that needs a heavy piece of equipment, and we always get brand new equipment, brand new batteries, and all that type of stuff. And it seems like every time we do that, the equipment malfunctions, the batteries die, the electronic systems in the equipment are zapped somehow.
There's some really interesting activity at the ranch. They'd been digging into Skinwalker Ridge and struck something, and the drill bit came out with some really interesting material that suggests there might be some kind of a manufactured artificial object inside that ridge. Now you guys have cameras there on the ground, TV cameras that are documenting a lot of the kinds of problems that those guys had, and you're seeing it for yourself. It's really strange. You'd have to say it's just not coincidental, right?
Oh, it's absolutely not coincidental. It happens so many times it's beyond statistical variation. I mean, we have memory cards on a daily basis that the data gets scrambled or completely erased. We have the big $30,000 to $70,000 television camera systems. They that are modern technology. They will just stop functioning. We have smaller, cheap cameras, in the hundreds to a few $1,000 kind of range that the memory gets wiped or the cameras just shut off for no reason. Cell phone batteries, you can take it right off of the charger and say 100%, and 5 minutes later you'll look and it'll be completely dead and turned off. And we've had car batteries do that. We've had bulldozer batteries. We changed batteries on a bulldozer 3 times in one morning, and with brand new batteries. And every time we hooked it up, the batteries instantly were dead. So this is something that, people can say, oh, it's convenient for TV or whatever, but anytime, just ask the experts that we've brought out that are contractors that we just paid to come do a job. And when they come out, and they'll every one of them, I don't think we've ever had one get there and say, oh, it's just another day at the office. No, every time they say, I've never had anything like this in the world happen to me after 25 years of doing this particular kind of job.
One of the part of the lore of the ranch is about digging, and I can tell you where that started. It was with the rancher who was there before Bigelow, and he had been told when he bought the property, hey, before you do any digging, you got to let me know. And he just thought it was odd at the time, and then he would notice when he would do any kind of digging at all, that would get a reaction.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure, if it's a direct causation, but there absolutely seems to be a correlation when we're digging with intent. Now, there's different kinds of digging. It's a ranch. There's post holes, there's pipelines, there's cables, there's whatever you need for daily operation of living on a ranch, and that never seems to be an issue. But it's when you're digging with intent to look for something or find something or dig something up. It's directed at trying to figure out what's happening here at the ranch. as opposed to just daily operations and maintenance, there seems to be something that tries to interfere with that. And I know that sounds crazy, but statistically, we see the equipment fail. We see people have physiological reactions. Some of them have even ended up in the hospital with sudden heart issues or sudden catatonia or sudden reactions that are dangerous brain kind of hemorrhages. It's really odd, and we can't say that this causes that, but they sure do correlate with each other an awful lot beyond just being a statistical oddity.
The injuries have been real. There's no question about that.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the most shocking and bizarre thing is to what purpose is that? What is it that if there really is some sort of intelligence that doesn't want us to dig there, why? What's buried there that they don't want us to find?
You guys had been drilling into the ridge, and you hit something.
Yeah, sure. We were drilling into the Mesa where we had some data suggest and some stories suggest this might be a point of interest, and we get a horizontal drill rig that's got a carbide diamond tipped bit that's hard, and it should go. The guy says it should go through granite, and they've drilled through steel reinforced concrete, and we get to a point that it won't drill through anything at about 100 feet inside the Mesa, and it keeps bouncing off of it and chattering against something extremely hard. He says he's never felt anything like it, and the track that it takes to sort of a semicircle underneath it, like it's. We kind of described it when we looked at it. If you had the bottom edge of a plate turned up sideways, you take a dinner plate and turn it up sideways, the drill bit tracked out a path kind of like the body. It was hitting the bottom of that and being pushed around it. And these pieces of metal came out, lots of it. We had many gallon Ziploc bags filled with this stuff. And we took it to the University of Utah to have them do mass spectrometry, X-ray, elemental analysis, scanning electron microscopy, all the different things we could test it. And the materials came back. They were not anything natural. The scientists there at the University of Utah said that it was absolutely a manufactured material. And the odd thing is that it was some weird elements. On one side, it was almost pure tellurium. In the middle was a 50-50 almost mix of iron and aluminum, which is something we don't mix. And then on the other side was almost pure europium. And I find that really odd that you've got these kinds of materials that are semiconductor and possibly superconducting in certain situation materials around a conductor material that to what end, and how did it get in that dadgum Mesa 100 feet in? It makes no sense.
Is europium something that's found in the basin as far as you know?
No, europium and tellurium both are abundant in asteroids, and we mine them because tellurium we use in solar cells and other microelectronics, and europium, it has certain properties that we use in certain types of microelectronics, and they're not rare, but they're not everywhere either. And there's not, to my knowledge, there aren't any big tellurium or europium mines in Utah. But why it's manufactured though? It's a thin layer coated on one side of this metal substrate, a thin layer on the other side. Back in the 90s, I was on Coast to Coast with Art Bell because I was a scientist that was investigating Art's parts for Linda Howe. One of the first scientists to study the layered materials on that. And what's really interesting is these materials, while they're different elements that we've pulled out of the Mesa on the ranch, they look very similar in terms of the layering, like Art's parts.
I mean, where this is leading, the suggestion that there's some kind of a manufactured object, maybe an advanced object that's stuck in that Mesa.
Yeah, that's where, that's what at least the current limited evidence we have would suggest. And I'll tell you, we got a lot more evidence last summer, and we did do some more drilling, but other than that, what we find is very exciting.
Maybe there's a connection to asteroid or meteor impacts?
Yeah, so I did a study on meteorite, asteroid or comet impacts, whatever, impact sites around the globe over the last, 100 million years or something like that. And really interesting is there are a lot of sites where there were religious stories took place there, or there were other sites where there were UFO sightings often. There were strange things that had happened there, and it looks like the Uinta Basin was created by, there was an impact there of some like 50 or 60 million years ago or something. But the question is that just correlation? Is it just, coincidence? I'm not a real big fan of coincidences, but what is it that crashed there? Maybe it was something that crashed there, and then that was of interest, and somebody else came to look and see what it was. Maybe they wanted it, and then maybe they left something behind that causes some of these strange phenomena, or maybe they're actively looking at it now, and that's why some people see UFOs going in and out of mountains and things like that. That's all speculation, of course, but we've got a lot of anecdotal evidence and now a lot of real hard scientific evidence that there's some kind of phenomena taking place at a lot of these kinds of locations. But I'd never seen a UFO or a UAP of any form, not even ball lightning. And when I got to the ranch within a couple of weeks of being there, I saw without a doubt this translucent sphere appear in the sky over the ranch. It just appear for probably 2 or 3 minutes and then just vanish without moving. And then we've seen many more. We've seen black amorphous UAP over a cow as it died. Seen them flying over the Mesa. We've captured video in infrared. We've captured microwave signals when they occur. We've even seen some changes in the entire radio spectrum when some of these things occur. So it's real scientific evidence that something is occurring. What are they? Are they craft with beings in it? Are they, spy portals from some other realm or distant location? Are they something new that Mother Nature's cooked up that we don't understand yet? Are they some magic technology that our near peers like Russia or China has come up with? Honestly, I think the last one is the most ridiculous one because the physics that some of these things are doing would suggest that these other countries had spent billions and billions of dollars in a Manhattan Project level effort, and we don't see evidence of that.
Drones and balloons do not explain what's been recorded on camera.
I challenge most people to keep drones flying in the air over Skinwalker Ranch because almost every time we bring drones out, we have many malfunctions. The batteries run dead. A lot of times, GPS doesn't function on the ranch like it does anywhere else, and the drones think they're completely different places, and they'll crash because they think they've already landed and turn off at 50 feet in the air, or they won't take off because they think they're 100 feet below the surface. It's just the strangest things like that, and it's not balloons or drones that we're seeing out there. Absolutely not.
You got a lot of rocket power on that ranch. Could you shoot one down?
Well, as we've said, these things are random as it appears. We can't predict when they're going to be. So what do you think the odds would be of us actually being able to hit one with a rocket? And that's really not why we're launching the rockets. The rockets are a test of we send up sensors to get them to certain altitudes and see what happens as the instruments come back down themselves, because they follow physics of aerospace engineering that we understand very well. And the rockets will, over the triangle area, for example, they statistically avoid a certain region in the sky, even if it's doing the opposite of what the aerodynamics would have the rocket do. And that's one of the tests that we've really went way out of our way to verify that there is absolutely something over the triangle that is anomalous and unusual.
All these rocket tests that you've done, it's almost like you're trying to outline the boundaries or outer limits of something that's up there, that's always there.
Yes, that's exactly right. So imagine you had a target that was an invisible target out in your yard, and you could put a dartboard behind it, and you just keep throwing darts. And then you look at the board later and you realize there's a hole in the middle of where the darts should have landed on their target, then there was something in the way that was making the darts move around it or miss it. and that's kind of what we're doing, and trying to get enough of them thrown up there that we can get a statistical picture of what we're looking at.
Is anyone else watching you?
I don't want to talk about that and speculate, because if they are, then and we knew it, then it would be giving it away. But if they are and we don't know it, then it would be a pure guess. But I will tell you that we detected that something was recording our conversations and rebroadcasting the conversations on different frequencies that we were not doing, and so that something is listening and watching, whether it is one of our near peers or some private citizens or something else. But the technology that we detected didn't appear to be any technology that we understood. It didn't look like just a standard, listening device, a bug or something retransmitting. It was something completely different, and that was really odd. And it's happened more than once.
I was absolutely astonished when Radiance Technologies put out that release about hiring you. They're based in your hometown. They're a major defense contractor with offices in 17 states. They do really great work, a highly regarded company both by the employees and by the government. And they had hired, and they don't shy away from mentioning your interest in the UFOs or Skinwalker Ranch, and they did the same thing with a guy named Jay Stratton, who was the head of the UAP task force, who worked on other programs, UAP related, and then you guys worked together there at Radiance. What are you up to?
Well, we're working for a company, a high technology company that, the job is to find great work to do that, will make the company money. And of course, our expertise has been in government research, intelligence community research, that sort of thing. And that's what we're applying it to. And of course, it is a company that's made a big business out of reverse engineering or foreign materials exploitation, FME as it's called, foreign materials assessment, FMA. And that means, if we had a Russian doohickey or a Chinese doohickey or some other foreign equipment, we reverse engineer how it works and try to understand it and see if the knowledge could help us, in future situations. So if there were other technologies to reverse engineer, I think we'd be the perfect place to do that.
I jokingly asked your company president, I asked him, well, are you guys taking apart some UFOs, or would you go after a contract like that? He didn't blink. He said, oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, if we had a customer that wanted us to help them with something like that, that's, it'd be absolutely right up our alley. I mean, we understand how to reverse engineer at least technology that we can find here on Earth in various situations. So if we were to find something, I think it would be, it'd certainly be a worthwhile endeavor, and it would be an exciting research project, that's for sure.
Tell me about being asked to work on the UAP task force by Jay Stratton. Was it in part because of the work you're doing, the investigation on Skinwalker, that you came to his attention?
He knew about me, but I didn't know about him. The first year I was out at Skinwalker Ranch, the first few weeks, I detected some signals that made me nervous that it was potentially some bad guys doing some bad things. So I went and reported it to security. And kept going up the chain. And then I got a call. Some folks said, hey, we need to go brief this office in the Pentagon. And so I went and briefed the office in the Pentagon, and there was a guy there that came in, and after we were done, he asked everybody else to leave, and he had a copy of my book that I wrote, Alien Invasion, which was a serious study on what we would do from a military and intelligence community standpoint, and even a civil standpoint, if we were invaded by aliens, and that's pretty bleak. But and what we should be doing to prepare. But anyway, he said, hey, I'm Jay Stratton. I'm the director of the UAP task force, and here's what we're doing, and we appreciate the brief. And would you like to come help us solve the problem, work on this problem? I was like, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I've been wanting to do that, my whole life. This is a dream come true.
The report that came out of the UAP task force, it's mandated by Congress towards the end of the year. And then, right at the time when the really hardcore work on that report gets underway, Jay Stratton, who'd headed the task force, gets yanked out of there for whatever reason. You guys put together a report, I thought it was terrific. I mean, it's broad strokes. You got a lot of numbers in there, not specifics about the cases, but you can read between the lines, and I think Congress did, and the public did to a large degree. Can you talk in general, without violating any kind of laws, about what you saw while working there? What kinds of evidence exists that the public has not seen?
Yeah, well, what I can tell you is that we had a lot of data from a lot of different sources, but we were only studying data taken from credible military sources. We did talk to the FAA about some commercial things and to NASA about some of their civil things, but we had better, pristine chain of custody data from fighter planes, military assets, and so on, military equipment. And so we stuck mostly to that because we knew where the data came from and we could track it and we could then investigate what it meant. And we had many. I mean, we talk about 144 cases specifically in the report, and only one of them turned out that we could prove turned out to be a balloon. The rest of them, there was not enough data to say that it was this thing or that thing. And there was a lot of data that suggested it was much more than some things that people want to, debunk or throw away. But we can't talk about some of the data because it was taken with classified instruments, of course. And so that's why, a lot of people can go after and say, well, what did they do? They had all this time and they just, this is the best they could do, was this 9-page report or whatever it was. Well, the report has there was a lot more to it than that, but that's not what got released to the public, and for good reason. I mean, think about it. If a F-35 is capturing something with any instrument on it, heck, everything on F-35, even I think the color of the paint's classified. So, I mean, you can see it became a difficult thing having every piece of data was at a different kind of classification even. So we couldn't even stick all the data together and do like a data trend analysis across data sets. It was a difficult task to do in 1 year.
Can you say anything about other images that you may have had access to? Is there better stuff that we haven't seen that maybe Congress or somebody else has seen?
I can't really say specifics, but what I can say is we had 144 cases we studied that were taken from military systems. And, I think, 3 have been released from 3 videos or so have been released from the public. So I guess you can infer from that whatever you want to infer. But, of course, there's more data out there.
You've seen the work of the debunkers. The East Coast incidents have been described as they must be balloons and drones. The West Coast warship, the 10 warships that were buzzed by 100 objects, and you've seen the debunking attempts there. You would consider both of those places, the cases that came out of those, as still genuine unknowns?
Yeah, absolutely. They were certainly genuine unknowns. And then I've just decided that I'm not even going to listen to the debunkers or even talk about them because they don't have all the data. They didn't get to see all the data, and it wouldn't matter, like you said. The UFO could land on their doorstep, and they would debunk it away as swamp gas reflecting light from Venus. It doesn't really matter. You're not going to change their mind. Study the science and release the information. Get the information into the scientific community for peer review, for discussion, for the general public to get to review as best they can, as best I can. And that's kind of what the secret of Skinwalker Ranch is. We're reporting our work in pretty much very real time, open to everybody. So it's something that people are just going to have to learn that it's going to take some time for us to figure this out.
Are you encouraged by the interest of Congress, and do you think that congressional interest will actually go somewhere?
Well, I certainly hope it will, and I hope it has enough pull and push in both directions, that it forces that the money gets appropriated, the funds get expended in appropriate places, and not just in places so that everything kind of goes away quietly, nobody ever discovers anything, and it just dies a quiet death and people forget about it. I think the general public is done with the many hundreds of programs that are all of them that come out and say, oh, there's nothing to see here, there's nothing to see here, when we know you can't hide it from the general public anymore, because anybody can buy scientific equipment at such a low cost and measure things for themselves. The work at Skinwalker Ranch is all privately funded. So, and I'd say we've got as much public data as anybody's collected with real hard scientific instruments. And I'm not saying other people haven't, but I'm just saying we've got at least as much as anybody else has done, if not more. And it's doable. Now, it can get expensive, but there are a lot of people out there with deep pockets. If they really want to know the answer to this, somebody's going to have to step up and just do it, because I'm not so sure that the government infrastructure is actually is designed in a way that they can tell everything that they discover just from national security reasons, and people are just going to have to accept that, and we're going to have to figure out how, as a culture and society, to get to the answer ourselves without expecting the government to take care of everything for us and just say, here it is, we're going to spoon feed you the answer. I think we're going to have to do the hard work ourselves.
You would say that the public is ready for whatever it is.
Yeah, I would say that, the public is at least capable of handling it. There are all the reports and studies that suggest, the stock exchange will go crazy. People freak out, won't go to work. I kind of have a different view on that. I think certainly even if it turned out to be, and I'm being, facetious on this a little bit, but if it turned out to be there's going to be a war between angels and demons, I want to know about it so I can at least be prepared somewhat. Is there something I can do to be prepared? I don't know. Civil defense, if a tornado's coming, I want to know that it's coming, and I want to go get in a storm shelter. I think the public has some rights to know at least if something could be a possibility. Now, I certainly wouldn't want to release information that could give away an advantage if there were a conflict to come.
One of the weirdest, strangest, unsettling parts that you discovered was these GPS monitors. Something was definitely interfering, right?
Oh, absolutely. Somehow or other, there's a phenomena or a technology being deployed on the ranch that can change GPS at will and make it be above ground, below ground, somewhere completely different, even in a different state. And it seems to only happen within the boundaries of the fence of the property, which that makes no sense.
Over the decades, people who live in the basin, not just on the ranch, but people who live in the wider basin, have reported all kinds of strange creatures out there, things that should not exist. Like, you haven't had any creature sightings there while you've been there, have you? And also animal mutilations.
I have a hypothesis on that, and that it's not that it's actually Bigfoot or dire wolves or ghosts or monsters crawling out of portals, as much as it might be how the individuals, their particular brains process the information they're receiving, and that's the best their brain could come up with to see whatever weirdness was actually happening. And to me, that fits the model of science better, in that it doesn't have to be, a cryptid one day and a ghost another day and a UFO another day. It's just something weird that our brains just can't kind of get to the bottom of.
So it's an effect from being exposed to some kind of energy or technology, as opposed to being actual creatures.
That's a hypothesis. I'm still working on how to test it, but I think it would explain it a lot more simply than having to come up with 30 different hypotheses for 30 different phenomena. There is a real aspect to it. Don't get me wrong. In fact, we've had 2 cows die and of unknown causes, and this baffled the veterinarians and the veterinary scientists that came out and looked at them. And one of them, when after it died, no predators or scavengers or even insects would touch it. And it's been there for 3 years, and it's just kind of looks like it's mummified because none of the predators will touch it. So it's weird. I don't know what to say about it.
Is it solvable? I mean, is it possible that maybe at the end of it, you could go 5 more years and you still won't know if there's an intelligence behind what's going on at Skinwalker?
Yeah, George, that's a really good question, and I think it could be very possible because this phenomena is so bizarre and so elusive. It's really difficult to get detailed and a lot of data on it. But who knows? Maybe we'll find some Rosetta Stone somehow that enables us to interpret what's going on and make contact. Yeah, the big question is which one? Who's the rat and who's the scientist, right?
Yeah.
I'm not so sure that we're not the lab rats, and it's just playing with us.